Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dig into a really compelling analysis from the mid-1990s, one that tried to predict the big challenges facing the West. And what's so fascinating is that it zeroes in on two major forces, each powered by a completely different engine.
So the whole thing kicks off with a really big question. What happens when new powers rise? At the end of the 20th century, the West suddenly found itself facing this new kind of confidence, this new assertiveness from two totally different parts of the world, one in Asia and another across the Islamic world.
Okay, so let's get right into the core idea. The author says, look, these weren't just two random things happening at once. Nope. They were driven by fundamentally different forces. On one hand, you have the Asian challenge, and that was fueled by just explosive economic growth. And on the other, the Islamic challenge, which was powered by something else entirely, dramatic population growth. All right, so first up, let's tackle the Asian affirmation. We're going to see how the source explains that economic explosion in East Asia and frames it as really a massive shift in global power. Now, this chart from the text is, well, it's pretty striking. Just look at those lines for China and the Asian tigers. We're talking places like South Korea and Taiwan, and compare them to the USA and Europe. It's not just growth, right? It's a completely different trajectory, almost vertical. The author uses this to say, hey, this economic surge was one of the single most important things happening in the world at the end of the 20th century.
And this slide really gets at the speed of it all, the sheer velocity. Think about this. It took Great Britain 58 years to double its per capita output back in its Industrial Revolution. The US, they did it in 47 years. South Korea, 11. Just 11 years. That incredible breakneck speed is absolutely key to understanding the surge in confidence that came with it.
And all that new economic muscle? Well, it led directly to a new kind of cultural swagger. This quote just captures that changing mindset perfectly. The source makes a great point. Wealth is often seen as proof that you're doing something right, as a sign of virtue. So, this new economic power unleashed this wave of cultural self-confidence and a brand new willingness to, talk back to the West.
So the source kind of boils this new confidence down into four key ideas, which it calls the Asian affirmation. The thinking went something like this. First, Asia's economic rise is going to keep going until it surpasses the West. Second, this success isn't just about economics. It's proof of a superior Asian culture, one that values the group over the individual. That leads to the third point, that these Asian societies share a common set of values. And finally, the big one. The East Asian model is so good, it should be the new blueprint for the rest of the world.
Okay, let's switch gears and look at that second challenge, the Islamic resurgence. Because this is a totally different story. This one isn't rooted in GDP charts and economic growth, but in demography, in population, and in a powerful return to faith.
Now, the author is super clear on this point. When they talk about the Islamic resurgence, they're not talking about some extremist fringe movement, not at all. They define it as a broad, mainstream turn toward Islam as a source of identity, of meaning, of stability in a world that was changing incredibly fast.
And this popular slogan, Islam is the solution, really gets to the heart of it. It captures this growing belief that the answers to all these modern problems, corruption, social decay, all of it, weren't going to be found in ideas imported from the West. The solution was right there, within Islam.
And here it is. This chart shows you the engine of that resurgence. Just look at the line from Muslim countries. While the youth population was set to decline in places like the West and Russia, the Muslim world was seeing a massive, sustained youth bulge. And as we know, young people are almost always the ones driving change, right? This huge demographic wave provided the energy, the manpower, the recruits for this incredible social movement.
And to help us get our heads around the sheer scale of this thing, the author makes a really powerful historical comparison. They say the Islamic resurgence was a lot like the Protestant Reformation in Europe. Think about it. It was a reaction against what were seen as corrupt systems, and it was a call to return to a purer, more authentic form of faith to guide everything, from your personal life to your politics.
And this is absolutely crucial. The source really emphasizes who was part of this movement. It wasn't, rural folks clinging to the past. No, the people joining were overwhelmingly the products of modernization. We're talking university students, educated professionals like doctors and lawyers, people who had recently moved to the cities and were feeling kind of uprooted from their traditional lives.
So here's the bottom line. You have these two incredibly powerful movements, and they're both challenging the Western-led world order. But, and this is the key takeaway, they're operating in fundamentally different ways with totally different results.
This slide really lays out the author's central argument perfectly. It's a tale of two different kinds of growth. For the Asian challenge, the driver was economic growth. And what was the impact? Well, it strengthened Asian governments. It gave them more money, more legitimacy, more power on the world stage. Now, contrast that with the Islamic challenge. The driver there was demographic growth. The impact? It often threatened the existing Muslim governments from within, and it put pressure on neighboring non-Muslim societies. Why? Because you had this huge pool of educated but unemployed young people who were restless for change.
Okay, so what did the author think was gonna happen next? Let's wrap up by looking at the predictions they made, looking forward from the mid-1990s. Well, the source saw Asian hypergrowth eventually cooling down and normalizing, which makes sense. It also predicted that the huge demographic wave driving the Islamic resurgence would eventually peak and then start to recede sometime after the 2020s. But, and this is a big but, it would leave behind a really lasting legacy. A new generation of leaders who would be way more committed to Islam, far more shaped by it than the generation that came before them.
And that really brings us to the final thought, doesn't it? This analysis is a snapshot from the 1990s, a framework for how economics and demography were going to reshape our world. So the question for us right now is pretty simple. How did it turn out? How have those twin engines, money and population, actually shaped the world we live in today? That's really something to think about.